Do you want to, so we're starting at the beginning? Okay, anytime.
Inquiry question. When individual rights are taken away, how is the human spirit affected? There are two reactions by those whose rights have been taken away: those who choose to take action and those who choose not to. Some are provoked to physically rebel, negotiate, etc. Those who do not wish to partake in these actions may accept their predicament, and may choose to run even when they may feel like they have no.
So the book we chose to read was Little Brother by Cory Doctorow. It's set in San Francisco, where the story focuses on the aftermath of a bombing. Marcus, our main character, is imprisoned for being a suspect without any evidence to prove. The DHS, or the Department of Homeland Security, puts everyone under heavy surveillance in fear of potential terrorists. Marcus, or Mikey, as he goes on this social networking site called the XNet, he tries to rebel against the DHS by gathering a group of people who share the same beliefs and committing acts of retaliation. So Marcus is an example of what a person who would fight for their freedom when his freedoms are taken away. So in the story, he faces a series of emotional stress during and after his period in prison. So in that time, he was unjustly humiliated for having refused to give up any personal information on his phone, such as like unlocking it to see what he's been up to or anything like that. And in doing so, his basic necessities were denied, which symbolized the DHS's power. So this led to abuse. He was confined in a solitary prison or something, and this led to helplessness. He felt inferior, which led to him submitting to the DHS. And you can kind of see how it affects his spirit, as in the beginning of him being in prison, he had refused to listen to the DHS or do anything that they demanded him to do, but by the end, he did anything that would get him out of jail. So that meant signing a contract without reading it or just to get out of there. So, but then after release, he reflects on how he was treated by the DHS, and he's angered by them. And in that way, he's motivated to retaliate against them.
Okay, so the supporting characters, Vanessa and Jolu, who are Marcus's two close friends, they are actually scared of the DHS, and they didn't go with Marcus to help him retaliate against them. And also because Vanessa was Korean and Jolu was Hispanic, they think that their backgrounds set them at a greater risk because of how they're not white and how the DHS is comprised of American white people, and so the discrimination and racism is kind of against them there. And as a result, they comply to the DHS regulations and they give up their privacy and freedom. Also, their other friend Daryl, instead of being released, he's the one who's been detained for months of questioning, and he undergoes basically everything that Marcus goes through. And the lack of visual rights and privacy leaves Daryl kind of emotionally unstable, and their experiences in jail scars the entire group with a sense of inferiority, and the DHS induces terror by taking away civil rights. I think so. And our text that we chose is Crackdown in Beijing. Basically, in Beijing at Tiananmen Square, a group of protesters for democracy, they held a strike, but then they were shot down by the Chinese police, and the Chinese police kind of just created some violence, and the protesters responded by retaliating through violence as well.
In the novel, Crackdown in Beijing, illegal social events were held in an effort to return the city to its previous state. They did not openly protest in the traditional manner as did the Crackdown Beijing protesters. The police in both the article and novel finally responded to these gatherings with more pressure for their actions. And there are similar themes from the people. Many give up, and a second social gathering in the book, and violent retaliation in the article. Our second piece of text, letter from Birmingham jail. A love letter written by Martin Luther King Jr. explaining reasons for imprisonment. He believed in equality and protested for desegregation in Birmingham. He used posted nonviolent tension, nonviolent protests, which bring efficiency.
So, in comparison to the letter from Birmingham jail and to the little brother, in the letter, Martin Luther King Jr. and Marcus were arrested for having planned or led any non-violent protests. And in both the text and the book, they vocalized their beliefs, which differed from the government, and that was seen as a sign of threat. And there was a quote in the letter, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice anywhere." So this meant that any injustice in one city would eventually affect a whole country. So this was important in getting rid of, even if the problem was just in one city. So Martin Luther King Jr. was imprisoned as an outsider for having intervened with Birmingham issues. In the book, Marcus emphasizes the importance of ridding the police state of his city in order to resolve the country as a whole. So he constantly says we want to get back our country and stuff like that.
There's this quote where Martin Luther King said, "Hate-filled policemen first take and even kill your black brothers and sisters," which depicts police in both societies reacting similarly to protesters and acts of violence. There's this other quote where Martin Luther King says, "Perhaps itself, the nation, and the world are in dire need of creative extremists," which stresses the need for extreme actions to get things done. Example, breaking the unjust law, committing a crime in hopes of enforcing improved laws. Marcus gathers groups of thousands to attract attention from DHS. King also mentioned the Negro has pent-up resentments and latent frustrations, and he must release them. Nonviolent protests do not pursue positive reactions. Violence will be the last solution. Prisoners are also prepared to go to jail and have learned not to retaliate.
So our research, we found this quote called "Big Brother's watching you" from the novel 1984 by George Orwell. Big Brother is the name of the party leader of the dictatorship. And in the novel, society is monitored through cameras set up on your television screen. And this also...
Sorry.
And then this also shows how terrorism forces humans to choose between their privacy or the national security.